members should Trig and Amy. But before they get in, I'll just do a quick little monologue, which will help you guys understand what it is that we're going to be talking about. So Dr. Denham assigned for us an assignment involving this YouTube Hangouts. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a variety of issues. In fact, as I pull up the blackboard, I should be able to go a little bit further with that. But in general, we're going to be talking a lot about certain philosophies that we have involving. We're just going to be talking about some philosophies we have involving resiliency, and it should be. Yes, we're going to be talking about things like functions, characteristics of certain things, different examples of challenges in long term. We're going to talk about what the difference is between emergency operation planning and a continuing of operation planning. That'll include some elements of continuity operations plans. And we're going to talk about the key components of the business continuity information network for rapid disaster recovery model. So all in all, this should take about, once they get on, this shouldn't take very long. But so basically, as I start off, let me just help explain by using some of my philosophy for this monologue. So first of all, when it comes to homeland security matters, especially in terms of infrastructure, we spend a lot of time looking at community-oriented things, how the federal government can help you in times of disasters, how states can help each other. We'll discuss that. But what I'm going to talk a lot about in this video has to do with a subject that really doesn't get a lot of attention, but I think you'll find it to be very beneficial. See, what I'm going to talk about is how the international community can help us in things like infrastructure. You see, in this modern day and age, we do have the luxury of fellow nations that are of a similar stature when it comes to infrastructure and things to that effect. In some cases, a little bit more so in certain. But all in all, we talk a lot about how our allies can help us and how we can help our allies. And I see that one of my colleagues is about to join. Hello, Amy. How you doing?
Hey, good.
Hey, so I was just doing a quick little 5-minute monologue. Just to catch you up to speed, we're talking about a lot about long-term planning, short-term planning, and I was saying and there's going to be a few things, but we'll go into a little more detail as we get further into this video. But I was saying while we think a lot about our federal government and state, local, and so forth, we tend to forget one thing: how in this day and age we do have the luxury of close allies who are equally, or in some cases like Japan, a little advanced in terms of certain infrastructure and situations, and how we can exchange certain ideas with these different countries. So we're going to talk a lot about long-term and short-term planning and the pitfalls of short-term planning, but also why the long-term planning may not always be the most beneficial. And I'm going to talk about how we try to find that happy medium. So that's basically a synopsis of how I'm going to try and lead this discussion. Is there anything that you have in mind extra?
No. Sorry.
It's all right.
So Okay, how is this working? I'm sorry, I don't understand what's happening.
So basically what we're going to talk about is you've got the script in front of you, right?
I got an outline.
All right, so that's basically the script of it, and we're going to talk about certain aspects of it. And I know it's not, and so basically what we're going to do is we're going to talk about, like I said, just the long-term and short-term planning. I even sent you some of the Blackboard information involving the long-term and short-term planning. So let's go ahead and get a quick start on that. So
but like, it's supposed to be a conversation with all three of us. How are we going to do this? Is what I'm wondering. There's just two of us.
Well, keep in mind, the other person in our group and I were in a conversation earlier. So, but she should be coming on in about 7 minutes top maximum. I've sent her the invite. She knows to be on here at about 11, so she'll be able to catch on when the time comes. So I think we should be fine there.
Okay. Okay. So you don't want to just wait until she gets on and then just record it then?
Well, the thing is, we're supposed to have about 45 minutes in terms of conversation with us getting about 15 minutes each. I'm trying to finish this thing off. If we have to go till 11:45, that's great. That's fine because I started early. By getting a long head start, we give her an extra 15 minutes to get in. If you see, and so my thinking is that way she still gets in, but we gave her some extra time to get on. That way she still gets to be involved in the 45 minutes that is mandatory. If that makes sense. And I could also fill in as some things that she said in the meantime, which will help Dr. Denham to understand what was being said in our earlier conversation.
Okay.
I just received an email. I'm just going to send her a quick response. Hopefully that helps you understand what my strategy is. And looks like she may be just about ready to roll. So, all right, here we go. Any minute now, she should be coming on. And so, the first thing that Dr. Denham is having us talk about is based on Baird's 2010 thing, discuss the differences in functions, characteristics, and outcomes of short versus long-term recovery processes and perspectives. Which perspectives and processes are more difficult to achieve in your view, and why? So, looking at my script that I made, some of the short-term functions are impacts area structure, temporary housing and shelter, infrastructure restoration, and debris management. Some of the long-term functions are hazard source control and area protection, along with land use practices, building construction practices, public health, mental health, and recovery and economic development. So what I'm thinking is some of the key difference. Let's see. So to basically answer that question, so one of the differences is the fact that the short term talks a lot about things that we can do like restoring people's shelter and trying to stop looting for things like that. And it's good, but what Trigg and I were talking about earlier was that it's good, but you have to be sure not to make people overly dependent on the government. And you want to try and create a situation for them in which how would I say this? You want to try and create a situation for them in which people are able to take care of themselves. You have that. You also try and set them up for a position to be able to return home or wherever they choose to go. Does that make sense to you?
Sure.
Okay. Then in the long term, you're talking about things like better building construction practices. Now, one thing that can be used. So I'm thinking that the short term might be that the long term may be a little bit difficult, but I don't think it's as difficult as the short term. Here's why. First of all, you're talking about infrastructure restoration on the short term. Some places are more apt to be able to do that. For example, do you think that the city of New Orleans would be, if God forbid they ever have another hurricane like Katrina, how quickly do you think they'd be able to restore their infrastructure, like their fishing or things like that, or even just during the BP oil spill? Like, how long did that knock out the oil infrastructure for them?
Right, about 6 months.
Exactly. So now the reason I think that the long term isn't so bad is the fact is if you use if you get help from your international friends, you can learn things from them that can help you. For example, let's take a look at Japan let's take a look at Japan. Of course, we know they got hit by the tsunami back in 2011. However, and I love Japan, but they get hit by a lot of earthquakes, and they've had a lot of tsunamis over their history. Partially because they are in the Ring of Fire area. So, because of that, over the years they built a resilience in their infrastructure to be able to withstand such a situation, by which a lot of lives were saved by the engineering concepts that they used. And so, and of course, they are big allies of ours. In fact, after Hurricane Katrina, I wrote this on a blog after doing some research. Apparently, the Japanese actually not only gave us a lot of money to help with that, they sent a lot of things like generators, and I think they even helped with some of the rebuilding processes in the New Orleans area. And where that helps us is the fact that we know that the Canadians, the Japanese, the British, and the Australians are always going to be tight allies, and we know that if they ever need us, we're the world's 911. But if we need them, they're always happy to help us. So the long term, in my opinion, isn't so difficult if you can get the help of your allies. Like I said, let's face it, the Japanese, they know a thing or two about making disaster-proof structures. Does that make sense to you? Because we got a lot of countries that like us. So, like I said, the long term isn't so difficult if you can get the help of your allies and not leech off of them constantly as well.
But isn't the point of the long term or the resilience to not rely on other people? It's to be self-sustaining. Isn't that part of what you would consider long-term recovery?
Well, see, here's my thinking: is you're not relying on them so much as you are asking them to help enlighten you on things that you may not know. Like, I'm sure that the Japanese have a few more ideas than we do, I said, in building typhoon-proof buildings. Because again, they're an island, but they face typhoons which are basically hurricanes to us. And so, again, you're not depending on them. But what you are doing is you are getting their help so that you yourself can learn how to handle that situation.
So you're talking more pre-planning, not so much a response to an incident that already happened. You're talking about being prepared for it in advance.
Yes and no.
In terms of like a tsunami hitting Houston or whatever. You're talking about getting with the Japanese to find out what they do ahead of time?
Well, more than just that, just seeing how they build their building codes. For example, I'm sure you know what in fact, this is something that, hey, and she's actually joining. Hey.
Oh, hey.
So,
hey, Amy, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. I'm in my car recording this.
All right, so we're talking about
strange.
All right, so we're talking about what we were talking about earlier with you,
Okay.
and I was telling her how, in my opinion, the short term isn't so bad. I'm sorry. The long term isn't so difficult compared to the short term. Because long term, if you use your allies, if you use our international partners, or get help from our international partners, you can generally tend to. I'm sorry. They may know a thing or two that we don't know. It's not to say that we're becoming dependent on them so much as it is learning from them and learning their system or some of the systems that they use that we don't have. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Anything there? Yeah.
Oh yeah, it makes sense to me. We talked about this earlier.
Yeah, I know. Well, I said we had a little situation earlier because for some reason it didn't actually save to my channel, but after running a series of tests, I can tell you that this should very easily be able to save to my channel. That's not going to be an issue.
Okay,
perfect.
Yeah, at least you could figure it out because none of us. I mean, I couldn't.
Me neither.
See, international help. I got a friend of mine from Australia to help me figure this out. So, because he's actually kind of a professional YouTuber. I think I showed you guys his channel the other day. So yeah, as you can see by the videos, he's got a lot of videos. So again, getting help, not relying on my international friend, but he did give me a few pointers, even though he's extremely busy. So, shout out to my buddy Rusty Rex. Shout out to my buddy Rusty Rex. Thank you for your assistance with that.
Okay, so now we're ready to go. So.
Well, all right. So
have you already discussed any of the questions?
Yeah, we're starting off on question 1. I was telling her why, in my opinion, the short term is more difficult than the long term to achieve. And same with and also if you look at the outcomes, the short term outcomes is reduced economic viability and increased vulnerability, whereas the long term is of course the reverse of that. So again, to me, what that says is the long term is easier to achieve. And again, especially if we get the help of our allies, given the fact that we live in a world where we have a lot of people that are have infrastructure systems that may be better than ours, or they may know a thing or two that we don't know about engineering. Like, so I've been to Germany. I've never been to Japan, but I've been to Germany. I can tell you their infrastructure is insanely good. I was telling Naria about the train systems they have there in Cologne. It is insane. The precision they have with that is insane. That screams to it's insanely good infrastructure. Maybe we could learn a thing or two from our German friends about that.
So when I was looking I agree with you that the short term is a lot more difficult, but my perspective on it is mainly that it's a lot of it has to do with because the resources are so reduced at the time that a disaster happens. It's unpredictable. You have trouble, first responders have trouble reaching each other. Sometimes there's a lot of trouble coordinating efforts because there's so many hands reaching into the pot at the same time. But your overall resources are so limited because infrastructure, like you're talking about, is usually affected drastically. And then communication is a huge issue. You're talking about Katrina. There was no cell service for Katrina for 2 weeks, not at all. You could text occasionally. Texting was just becoming a thing then, but there was no cell service whatsoever. So first responders didn't have that as an option at all. So I think those types of things make it really a lot more difficult. Whereas with the long term, like in the COOP video that we watched, it talks a lot about you can plan for a lot of the long term stuff, secondary buildings and secondary infrastructures and communication systems and things like that. So that's why I think it's short term's a lot more difficult. I definitely agree with you on that.
And I also agreed. Earlier, I was telling Daniel how I have family in the Bahamas. And so there's a lot of hurricanes that hit the Bahamas, but they don't take the initiative to fix their houses or anything because they're expecting another disaster. So it's like, it brings up the question, why would we want to fix this if we know we're expecting a hurricane in the next 2 to 5 years? And that's what I was discussing with him.
Okay. And what I was saying also is how, again, according to some research I did, Get this, there were 30. Our friends to the north sent several Mounties, which are the which is the National Police Force of Canada, down to the affected areas, particularly Louisiana. They also sent 37 professional volunteers and advisors, and a lot of them, in fact, they actually beat the National Guard and FEMA to the areas. So what they were able to do to help us was to not so much make communication like impeccable, but they managed to help, at least in the short term, help restore some of the communication lines, along with a few other things, along with helping the search and rescue efforts, which helped the police which helped the New Orleans police be able to handle other problems. And so what that says to me again is international help can be very useful. Again, and of course you have now that partially also comes from long-term planning, so you know with your international friends how they can help us in these situations. I was saying to Nellie earlier. Now I was hungry at the time, so I was just thinking pizza. But I was saying, if God forbid you have a disaster, it may be good to have our Italian and French friends on the phone helping us with the food situation. Because let's face it, they make really good food and they are good allies of ours. Try to add a little humor into it.
Okay. I'm like, tell me you're joking. Okay. Gotcha.
Well, think about it. We got a lot of European allies, right?
Uh-huh.
Our European allies are known for food, right?
Right, but I can tell you after Harvey, the last thing I was thinking about was waiting for pizza from Italy. I would have eaten the drywall if it was available to me because I was starving.
What I'm saying is whenever they're able to get here, they can be very helpful with their, like I said, I've actually volunteered at a lot of homeless shelters, and let me tell you, the food there is absolute. I mean, I'm sure if it's the last line of defense, you'll eat it. But let me tell you, if our Italian friends can find a way to get over here, that certainly helps because they know a thing or two about cooking.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I agree with you on that. I'll be honest with you because it's there's a lot of coordination effort that goes into everything, and I think having that is just one more person in the way. It's just one more element to coordinate, and it's I mean, the food is like Red Cross efforts. They handle all that. I mean, and they're actually. I have my criticisms of the Red Cross, but in terms of that, they actually do a really good job they handled our shelter. The one I was at, it was 7,000 people and they were able to feed 7,000 people. And that's pretty impressive with local donations and just the Red Cross. Sure enough. I would hate to have to wait for international assistance on something as vital as food. Yeah.
Yeah, you have a point. I agree with you.
Yeah, we don't want too many cooks in the kitchen, huh?
No. But I mean, there are some points definitely with the disasters that, we can learn a lot because, and they from us, I mean, like the tsunamis, actually some of that would have come into play, not the force of the water, but the amount of water would have come into play for a lot of the flooding that's happening lately. Because I mean, we've seen it all over, Maine, I think was the most recent. But
actually, Japan
I don't know if you guys are, what's that?
Actually, Japan just got hit by some flooding.
Oh, again? Yeah. I mean, are you guys from Houston? I'm sorry, we didn't really.
Yes and no. I'm from Houston, but I spent a lot of time up in Jersey during the summer. In fact, I'll be spending the last week and a half of the course in New Jersey. Actually, probably the last week of the course in Jersey.
Okay.
In fact, my last video will be in Jersey. You'll see Jersey in the background.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's cool. We'll go all over the country then with these videos. But yeah, so Houston for me, like it seems like every holiday it floods lately, which is crazy. Substantial flooding. July 4th, it just flooded again. And the response was much better. Police force and EMS and everything, it was a much more prepared response because unfortunately we go through it twice a year now with substantial flooding, it seems to me anyway. Just heavy rainfalls and everything floods. So, I mean, we would actually benefit from something like the tsunami cleanup efforts and how they reacted and how they handled everything. Sure. But yeah, it's definitely, unfortunately, around here, there's a lot of national incidents that Katrina we took a lot of lessons from. So
I think what that speaks to is the practice that countries have. They know what's likely to hit them, so they're able to build a resilience to it. I sort of liken it to a flu shot. I hate flu shots. I hate getting injected. But at least it's building a resilience to the flu, which makes it less likely that it'll be impact me extremely detrimentally, as opposed to not getting the flu shot. So I sort of see some of these disasters as kind of like a flu shot against future disasters, if we learn the lessons correctly.
Sure. And I think that should be part of the long-term plan of resiliency, is to definitely, come back in afterwards and look back at what we've done and analyze and self-criticize ourselves to say, what could we have done better, and incorporate that into our operational plan so that when something happens again, we'll have those elements that we missed the first time covered. So that should definitely be part of the long-term efforts that we're talking about. Yeah.
Nahryatrigg, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
I agree with what you and Amy are saying about the vaccination. I think with a long-term recovery, I think we should take everything short-term into consideration about what didn't work and what did work, and try to implement that into the long-term recovery. Because sometimes I think with some disasters, people try to rush to respond to recovery, and in reality, it does take time. So if they could take the things that they considered would be short-term, maybe for the long-term recovery, it would be proceeded better.
Yeah, I see that. Point taken. And in fact, I'll go one step further. Hurricane Sandy was something that, of course, hit me close to the heart because I spent a lot of time up in Seaside, New Jersey. In fact, you may recall the roller coaster in the water after the storm. And part of the problem that New Jersey had is that they don't get hit by hurricanes very often, at least not head on like Sandy did. I've been there at least a couple times I know of where tropical storm passed over us, but did not make direct landfall. In fact, I know we're not supposed to use Wikipedia, but I just thought I'd look it up for just for grins, and I saw apparently that New Jersey hadn't been hit in like 100 since like 1903, like head on by a hurricane. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, if you're not getting, if at least a major hurricane, so it's like, and Hurricane Sandy was a Category 3 when it hit New Jersey. Part of the shielding that New Jersey usually has is that the water is usually cooler up there as opposed to down here. So the hurricanes tend to experience some shear and some cooler water, which means that they can't strengthen or weaken, better yet. Unfortunately, Sandy was so strong that it was able to withstand that and just deliver a really strong punch to New Jersey. Mm-hmm. But I will say this to my buddies in Jersey, big credit to their resiliency though, because I went back up there. I wasn't sure if we were going to be able to make it back there the following year, mm-hmm. But when I went up there, all the wood was gone that was in the water. The pier was still needed some fixing, but they had some rides up, and they just said, you know what, we're just going to go with it and see what happens. And it actually turned out to be a pretty good situation. Then later that year in 2013, we had a major fire that hit on the Seaside Park side, which meant that they had to get the entire part of the boardwalk stripped off again. Like brand new boards had to get stripped off. The only part of Seaside Park that survived was the sawmill, where if everything goes right, you'll see me broadcast my last video from. Mm-hmm. If I can talk, because the manager there is somebody I've known since I was in diapers.
Yeah.
But the fact and the reason that they survived is back in 2003, they had a fire of their own, so they were the only ones on that side with the sprinkler. So again, that goes back to the fact that they had experience with fires before, so they knew how to build a resiliency to it. There were some singes, but it wasn't. I said they didn't get torched like the rest of Seaside Park did, or at least outside the boardwalk. So again, and then I went back up there a year later. Again, just rebuilt, except for the establishments, but the boardwalk is just rebuilt. And and then all the way through last year, like they've done an insanely good job. I'm looking forward to seeing what they look like this year, because I'm going to try and also post some pictures on here, because I see I can actually put a chat thing up here, which would be good. So you guys can actually see what New Jersey looks like now. That tiny town in Jersey looks like now compared to when it did during Sandy.
Well, that's kind of, it's interesting that you say that, because that's really cool about the resources that we have available to us today. There's a lot out there that it's amazing with the Google Earth type of technology that exists today. We can actually map out like floodplains and things, and there are literal maps that can be made to show like where flooding is expected to happen. If such and such an amount of rainfall would happen, this is what we can expect to see. And they can do that for the up to the 1,000-year floods that we've been getting lately. And they can actually, there's talk of FEMA proactively handing out checks and things to help mitigate damage ahead of time, because they can predict from the storm models what's going to happen. And I'm speaking strictly in storm disasters, just because we're talking about Katrina and Sandy so much. But it's amazing how far technology has come, from helping us prepare for those things. So some of the short-term issues can actually be handled a lot better than it used to be ahead of time, because we can start sending out resources beforehand. In Katrina, there was a lot of the let's let the local government handle it. No, let's let the national government handle it. There was I mean, that's simplifying it greatly, but there was actually no response in New Orleans at all from anything other than nonprofit agencies. And again, I'm simplifying, for like 3 days.
Right.
Afterward. Even then, it was local law enforcement governmental agencies that were going in before the National Guard finally came to their assistance, because no one knew. The left hand didn't know what the right hand's was doing. And now technology is amazing we literally can see what the floods are having, and exactly where to put resource stations, where to put those Red Cross stations, where to put, you can take demographic information and you can figure out, okay, there needs to be X number of MREs in a certain area to be able to satisfy the needs in that area. And if you can look at it ahead of time and realize, wait, there's not going to be enough, you can put in an additional distribution point of that stuff. We didn't have any of that before. Before, we were just scrambling to get resources to people. So although I still do think the short term is more difficult, just because I've lived through it, and you have too, obviously, it's amazing how far things have come to be able to help us prepare to handle the short term.
Yes, and I think that's going to be very important. Nahrya, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
About the technology, I think, like you were saying, how there's different type of ways you can track floods. And I was in a critical infrastructure protection course last semester, and we were able to track how high the sea level would be in different parts of the world if a hurricane were to hit. And I thought that was so cool, where we could go to you could either go to Europe, or you could even do New Orleans or the Galveston area, and we could put it's the hurricanes at a category 5, and it would show you either the whole city is underwater or half of the land is underwater. And I thought that was cool how technology now, you can map out or predict what's happening, but you can't really predict how it's going to affect you when it does happen. But you can see the whole land is going to be underwater, we should evacuate. It's a serious deal instead of something that you should just stay and work off.
Is that what Denim Last Full?
Yeah, that's
because I think I was there for that one. If that was last fall.
Oh, it was in the spring.
Oh, never mind. I wasn't there for that.
Yeah, that's in that video spoke a lot about that too. Just the ability to prepare and think about as much as you can ahead of time. One of the things that struck me as interesting with the video was it wanted it was trying to get the employees to or the company to actually have their employees think about having to handle grief during, you know, are you going to be able to handle your grief in the event of losing a loved one and still be able to do what you need to do for the company? I thought, okay, I wouldn't, as a company, as a business, I wouldn't have even thought that's such a specific thing, but such a necessary thing. If someone loses a family member, or are they going to be able to function? And I mean, that's a very specific element of the plan that I was actually impressed that it got that detailed. I mean, obviously I don't have that sort of plan in place for my family. So, and with what I do, I'm a police officer, so I get told where to go. And basically our expectation is it does not matter. You will be at work. So I guess I look at it from a different perspective. That struck me as really interesting.
That is interesting. I agree.
It is. So let's go ahead and move on to question 2, which is Ruben stated that she had concluded that the research and knowledge base in the realm of long-term recovery is seriously inadequate to the needs that we face today. Using Baird's article, provide evidence and specific examples of challenges to long-term recovery faced by researchers, practitioners, and policymakers. So just seeing what I'm seeing here, one of the things that looks to be trying to build is in the knowledge base for what we need, such as things that we may end up facing in the future, such as global warming and rising sea levels. Now, to me, that's debatable, but I think it does raise a good point, is that we don't know what's going to hit in the future. I mean, just look at Hurricanes Harvey and Katrina.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, Harvey, as I was saying in Nahryatrigg, Hurricane Harvey was actually a little bit stronger than Katrina was when it actually made its final landfall. Where Katrina had was two things. First of all, we sort of knew what kind of hurricane that was going to be after what it did to Florida. Now, did we know it was going to hit New Orleans that bad? Probably not. But we knew what it was capable of. Harvey was kind of a late bloomer, if you will. That started off, I remember that being a tropical storm, and before I knew it, it was a Category 4, and I was heading off to Dallas. I ended up heading off to Dallas to evacuate, and realizing, oh, this isn't good. I probably need to get out of here. So,
well, and both of those were failures in infrastructure, really, when it comes down to it. You know, they were catastrophic failures in infrastructure, because with Katrina, the levee broke. That's all it was. A very specific area of Katrina flooded solely because the levee broke. And in Harvey, I mean, there's been multiple studies done 10 years, 20 years beforehand that said it will take one storm. And I mean, actually, we've had two now. Allison was not any fun either. But there is no drainage. There's no the systems that they proposed to put in place never got put in, because, as always in Houston, there's no money. So they've gone back and said, if you would have done X, Y, Z, this would have been avoided. So different types of failures in infrastructure, but both failures.
I agree with that. But on the other hand, Hurricane Katrina, which we knew was going to be, was a big storm surge maker. Hurricane Harvey ended up being a big flood maker. So just seeing the different kinds of storms like that says a lot about how the fact is that you can have an idea of what you'll do in specific storms, but no two hurricanes are exactly the same. Same with tornadoes. Just by looking at a tornado, you have no idea if that's going to be a Category 0 or a Category 5. It has to do with damage first before you can go back and realize, oh, this is that kind of a tornado. In fact, even the way they have so many definitions as to what makes a tornado F0, what makes an F5, like what damages does it have to do, and they still have to come up with new definitions after different tornadoes, because they have no way of knowing for sure. Right. So you don't know what these tornadoes are going to do until they actually do their damage. So in that sense, I think that's where the long-term trying to build businesses back up comes into play, like how that's difficult. Like I said, because Nahrya, I think you said you're from you went to U of Oklahoma.
Yes, University of Oklahoma. So we dealt there was tornadoes all the time during tornado season, and how I was telling Daniel, as college students, we really didn't take it seriously because, it's just a tornado. And you have people who actually are from Oklahoma telling us, "Oh, don't worry, we get these all the time. It's nothing severe."
Sure.
But then we see on the news like, "Oh, somebody died," or somebody's house is gone. And that's when it starts to click, like, okay, maybe we should take shelter, or maybe we should find ways to prepare, because we're just told like, oh, you'll be fine, you can do your regular your regular daily stuff.
Right. Well, and yeah, it's funny because that's the same thing with Katrina. As we were told until it hit on Sunday night, we were told Sunday morning, you can stay where you are, shelter in place, you're fine, it's just another storm, it'll probably hit east of us. And that was a big part of why New Orleans wasn't evacuated. Number one, just like you guys with the suit, we never left for storms ever. I'm sorry. I actually
evacuated. For me, I've ruled if it's category 3 or higher, I get the hell out of there.
Right. Well, and a lot of homeowners won't, because they want to protect their property, and because I've lived here for 60 years. Why would I leave? I've never left before. And that was the mentality that got a lot of people in trouble for that. So, and then there was no evacuation plan. Half of their buses flooded and all that. So a ton of things. But I think a lot of like what you were saying with the different not knowing what's going to hit and how it's going to hit, that's part of mitigating the damage. And that's part of what researchers need to do ahead of time, is trust the technology, trust what's out there, the models that can be done. And based on those models, you do your worst case scenario, and then you work backwards from there as to what planning needs to be done. I think that's a huge challenge that they face.
Yes.
For sure.
Now, one other thing I'm going to talk about is the fact that is looting. Because part of the problem that New Orleans had was that you also had a lot of people looting, which meant that police officers and other people basically had the green light to go in if you will shoot. Actually, some cases literally shoot. Whereas if you look in Japan, you had almost zero looting over there. Now, part of the reason. Now,
just so you know, the media has a big part of that.
I agree.
A huge part of that, because New Orleans, that was blown out of proportion drastically. Like, I can't stress that enough. So I definitely see your point about looting, but just so you know that, there were very few instances of actual looting.
Fair enough. But with that being said, my point is, part of the reason I talked to a Japanese friend of mine, he's from Tokyo, so he wasn't involved in that tsunami, but he told me, I asked him, why was it there was little looting? Because I actually had the chance to talk to him. He said, yeah, part of the reason is that we take shaming in our society extremely severely. He said that even to this day now, they don't necessarily have the seppuku to the levels that they used to, but still in today's day, when I was talking to him, he said the last thing you want to do is bring shame onto you and or your family. And things like looting are among the most shameful things you can do in Japanese society. And I thought, that's another case where maybe there's things that we can learn from our allies, because, I mean, maybe I'm reading a little too much into this, but it seems to me that there's a lot of people in our society that doesn't seem to exactly understand what shame is. And there are some things that are actually really that we should really be shaming in our society, but we actually promote.
Yeah, that speaks to that social capital element of resilience that, it's a lot of people who have higher economic standings and they're in a better situation overall and can do things like, because another thing is evacuating for a storm is really expensive, and not everyone can do that. So when people with no means found themselves in a situation where they had nothing and the little that they have was lost, yes, some of them looted. Yes, you saw that on the news that there were a couple instances of televisions leaving stores, but the majority of them were actually getting of the actual looting or burglary situations. They were actually looking for resources. It wasn't, and I get your point. It's because everybody, people are going to take advantage of the situation. Unfortunately, it's the world we live in today. But I think a lot of that goes to that social capital element of the resiliency part of it. It's if it's a strong community situation, you're going to have a lot less than that, less of that. Which, how do you get there? The great question, right?
Right. So I'm gonna go ahead and go to questions 3 and 4, and then I'm gonna circle back to something that Nahrya and I were talking about earlier. But let's go ahead and go to questions 3 and 4 before I get to there, because I just want to make sure we do that first. I want to hit these important things first, and then if we have time, I'll circle back to something else I have in mind.
Okay.
I think Nahrya may know what I'm going to be talking about, but
the airfare.
Yeah, that and a few things to that effect. I'll circle back to that if we have time. So, question 3 is: what is the difference between emergency operation planning and continuity of operation planning? And Whitworth identified 9 elements of continuity planning operations. What are they? Which ones are the most critical in their view? So I went over to we went over and I think it was number 9, if I'm not mistaken. So the first one that we saw was plans and procedures, and it's talking about how things like activation of the National Park Service, continuity of operations following 9/11, and using the services of 9/11. I'm sorry, of the National Park Service to help with the infrastructure and things to that effect after that man-made terrorist attack. And this is where Nahrya and I got into the conversation about the airfare and things to that effect. Is the fact that, or is this the thing that, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's a lot of action going on up in Yellowstone. That I'm sure you heard that there's that Steamboat Geyser, the biggest one in the world, how it's a little more active than usual. And this will circle back to a little bit if we have time. But point being, so just to get in a brief, try and brief it up a little bit. We don't know what Yellowstone will do, but we know what some powerful volcanoes in the past did do, such as Mount St. Helens, Krakatoa, Anton Krakatoa, which is coming up, the volcano in Guatemala not long ago that erupted. So we have an idea of what powerful volcanoes can do. What we don't know is what a supervolcano can do. But what we should do, in my opinion, to start things off, is to have a plan and a set of plans and procedures for what you do if, God forbid, that volcano, because you never know when they're going to actually erupt. They're saying, it could be thousands or hundreds of years from now. You don't know that. We have ways to find out about when, but we don't know for sure when that's going to erupt. And if that thing keeps, that Yellowstone volcano, geyser keeps going, who knows? That may actually be a warning sign. Like, this may not be 100 years from now. This may be less. And so we better start figuring out what you do if that happens. So this is where I came in with the conversation and the idea of saying 2 things. Firstly, what you do is we talk to our allies in Japan who have the bullet train, which is where they're trying to build it between Dallas and Houston, and say, here, I have an idea. How about you help us get a train connected from there into the Jackson Hole's airport, which shouldn't take long. Which by a bullet train, it won't take that long. Then you ferry them from there. You use the FAA to help, in the National Park Service to help with the airfare. So you say, instead of price gouging, lower your airfares to your major hubs, and we'll give you a tax write-off. What that does is it gives them a chance to. It gives these airlines a chance to help. I'm sorry, these airlines are more able to help evacuate people out of that volcanic area, and they have a financial reason to do so. Is it expensive? Probably, but what it does do is it helps is in the long run it helps save a lot of people's lives that want to get out of there. Now if they don't want to get out of there, that's their choice. That's their call. But at least you give them the options like you take a quick train right down to the airport and get the hell out of there.
Well, I mean, yeah, I see your point. Because a lot, like I know, Puerto Rico and things, I like a lot of it's going towards the airfares are declining in certain situations, and it came from, as you mentioned before, public shaming. With social media being what it is, when they gouge, it becomes immediate fodder for social media, and then it's actually illegal to gouge your prices in any event of a natural disaster. If it's declared a disaster, you cannot raise your prices from what they were before the disaster, and that goes across the board. That's gasoline, that's bread, that's across the board. So I think they are kind of taking some action with that, but with the super volcano, basically Jackson Hole won't be here anymore. So,
I agree with that.
If that happens, they are dead. So,
half the Pacific Coast won't be there.
Well, yeah, it's there are models. It's cool. I happen to be, I love national parks, and Yellowstone is one of my favorites, and so I watch a lot of and I read a lot on the super volcano.
I see a lot of stuff about it.
Yeah, the models, because they have researched it, and they know what will happen, and there's a timeline for your death if Yellowstone erupts. It'll be just a matter of months. But what it does is, I mean, it interrupts everything. I mean, communication is already spotty, sketchy at best, almost non-existent in Yellowstone, but it's going to take the interoperable communications and it's going to be null and void. And I mean, some of the other things mentioned in the article, like alternative facilities, where are you going to go? I mean, the bullet train, yeah, but so that's going to take what, 300-400 people to where?
Right.
I mean, long term, if you talk about resiliency. Sorry.
Oh, you're fine. I was just chiming in what you were saying. I was saying,
yeah.
Like, the people who are traveling, do they have family and friends there? Like, where are they going to stay? Are there shelters offered? Mm-hmm. Like, they're basically, yes, they get help to travel to wherever they need to go, but when they get there, they're kind of on their own to find shelter.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you're evacuated to a place like Los Angeles, actually Los Angeles, they're still gonna get some. But let's say you get evacuated to New York. Yeah, it's a big city. Yeah, you got a situation there, but at least you're for the most part out of the way of the major ashfall. So that's basically the idea. Is like that area's screwed anyway. Let's try and so to me, that's the best way I can think of to mitigate that situation using government resources with a set of plans and procedures, and just getting as many people out there as possible. Not saying that you have to load them all onto our international friends. That's kind of unfair. I was thinking that might be a good idea, but as I was thinking about it, it's like that's kind of unfair. But what you do is now, if they want to go internationally from there, that's on them. But at least as long as we can get them at least to where there's projected to be less than 4 feet of ashfall, that's the best we can offer them.
Well, and that's why we have Homeland Security, because the last thing that we need to do is be dependent on outside resources. So, we piss off our allies in Europe. Does that mean that if, the super volcano erupts, we won't get any assistance? Like we have to have a plan in place that we can address them themselves. But, you were speaking to, just to use one of his terms, the identification of essential functions and activities. I mean, that's what, have a plan of escape, even if it might be futile, you need one.
Yeah, like my idea might be crappy, but at least it's throwing stuff at the wall saying, hey, you know what? Here's a potential option. You're not relying on the Japanese to get you there. You're just using their technology that they brought over to you to get as many people out of there as possible and quickly. Because if once the warning signs start to happen, you have a limited amount of time that you need to get as many people out of there as quickly as possible. In my opinion, a bullet train is a damn fast train.
Right. But
so you may want to think about using that to get a lot of people out there, because some of those trains, they can carry a lot of people and fast. And that's what you need. And if in a situation, like, you can't use that in Houston, you can't use that in the Gulf Coast to evacuate from a hurricane that's just going to get flooded. So that might be part of the reason they have that going to Dallas. But
no,
obviously,
we do have oh gosh, and it's going to escape me right now. We actually do have a plan for the road systems where basically, if you think about it, the interstate runs east and west.
Yeah.
I can't remember what it's called right now. I'm sorry, I can't think of the term. But when a threat is imminent, like in a hurricane situation, they will route both of those lanes. Will say, so Galveston. I live near Galveston, so 45 north would be my route of escape. So 45 runs north and south. It will. They turn both lanes.
Because it doesn't leave Texas.
So that, because you don't need to head towards a hurricane and everyone needs to leave. So that, I mean, it's not exactly, it's not a permanent set, here's our escape route, here's the hatch pull here kind of plan, but they do have quick escape routes or plans and procedures in place.
Yeah, and to me, that's where that airline idea came from, is saying, look, it's an option, it's there, try to use, if you can use it, great, please do, get out of there.
Yeah, it's just in a mass evacuation, the trains and the planes only take so many people, and they're not going to come back to pick up more.
True.
So, yeah. But I mean, definitely.
Now, moving on, it's also talking about a delegation of authority, which of course is important so that you know who's going to be in charge there. That's part of the idea of the FEMA courses that we're doing. Order of succession, that's always important. Alternate facilities, that's where it's getting these different airports from. Like, you don't send them to Denver, you send them like Newark, LA, maybe Hawaii, but that's kind of a stretch, but it is a state, so that's possible. All right, and inoperable communications, we're gonna have to make sure we fix that up just to speed through this. Vital records and databases, we're gonna want to make sure we have that. Test training and exercises. If like around the volcano, you're going to want to have the Park Services people and FEMA practicing drills for, here's what we'll do, like simulating situations. Say, okay, here are the situations. The volcano is going to erupt in 1 week from now. Let's practice our evacuation services. Like, don't alarm the guests. Put a sign that this is only a drill, so don't worry about this. But have like a volcano siren that says it's about a week from now. The siren will, once we get it's about like a month or a week from now, the siren will start to sound. Get out of there as soon as you hear that siren. It's go time.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Sure.
Yeah, that makes sense.
See, in Oklahoma, you guys have tornado sirens, right? And that tells you, okay, unless you know it's drill day, you hear that siren, get in cover.
Right, and most of the times people don't even take cover.
Yeah, but the idea is there to say, okay, unless it's just like once a month, you test the siren in Yellowstone, and you say, okay, if it's not that one day a month, unless we tell you otherwise, get the hell out of there. We don't need you sitting back there.
Yeah, and most of the evacuation, like most of the planning, or practice, or I think that's what I'm trying to say. So the drills, when you do the drills, it's for the employees, it's for the managers and whatnot. So like it's for us with the evacuation drills and the sheltering drills, it's the city planners, it's FEMA, it's national representatives, it's our county, the PD representatives, there's HFD representatives, there's Metro representatives, and they're all there, and basically everything's laid out as if it would be real. But anyone who participates in it, like in the event of tell with a guest, that wouldn't actually happen. They wouldn't do it to where the guest alarmed, because you can actually trigger a panic. So they don't do it that way on purpose. But they do it separately so that the people who will direct them, which I think the delegating authority situation, that they know what to do, and they know how to, I mean, I call it herding the cattle, which is probably not the right way to put it, but you know, you need people to go through that one gate, and that's how you practice getting the managers to get them through there. You're never going to get the people to respond properly.
Right, and that's why I'm saying at the park, for example, again, going back to Yellowstone, what you do is at the park entrances, you put a sign there that says, like one of those electric signs, and you say, on this day each month, you'll hear a siren. Don't panic, that's just a drill siren.
Yeah, my only concern with that, to play devil's advocate, is what if that's the one day that the super volcano erupts at that time and on that date? And you have a bunch of people who won't be listening to you.
Right.
And I can tell you from being a police officer, God bless them, but people are not always the smartest. And you can tell them 12 times this is not real. And you're going to get 37 million 911 calls saying, oh my God, I just heard the alarm. The volcano was going off. I mean, just because people respond to the immediate, you know, and
you don't want to cry wolf
too many times. Too much credit when you're talking about masses.
Yeah.
So that's a really harsh way of putting that, and I apologize.
Hey, I agree with you. People are stupid at times.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, let's get. We're running out of time. Let's go ahead and go to question 4. This is the big finish. Let's talk about what are the key components of business continuity information network for rapid disaster recovery model. So Nadia and I looked at the model, and it says, how do you think this could be used to strengthen collaboration between business and emergency management entities? Do you think this could be more useful for the short-term or long-term recovery, and why? So the model that I saw was talking about things like co-op budget, key resources, things like that. And I think that's definitely helpful because we need to be sure to have a plan in place for how you get businesses back on their feet. And we got like maybe 5 minutes, so let's not take forever with this because it's coming up on 11:50, and I want to try and get this thing done in about 5 minutes so that I can have enough time to send Dr. Denham the stuff.
Sure thing.
So anyway, let's get this. This is the last thing. Let's get this through. Then we can do whatever the hell we want after this. So anyway, let's talk about. So the idea of the continuity is just to make sure, like, once a disaster happens, what's the plan for the business, as far as I understand it. And so basically, we just want to make sure that these businesses have a plan in place for how to do it. Does anybody have any questions about that?
No, I mean, I think it's definitely necessary for them to work together. I mean, you know, not getting too much into the plan itself. It's vital for them to be able to work together. Any sort of plan or network will help them do that. And it'll help both in the long term and short term. I think more so in the long term.
Yeah, I think the most critical part is the telework assignments, which I believe to be communications, which of course would be extremely important in situations like that. In fact, it says primary method of communication. Because you always want to make sure you have some backup plans for communication, because you never know if like your internet's going to go down, like in the case of a volcano, which, as you said, the communications are crappy as it is over there. Because in National Park, I've been to the Grand Canyon several times. I can tell you, my cell phone sucked there. Well, my cell phone always sucks, but it sucked worse there. So I used the payphones there all the time when I was camping over there if I needed anything. Even then, I was lucky to get a dial tone. It's like I got maybe one dial tone a day, and even then I had to spend maybe 10 minutes to get that call in. See, we obviously need to make sure that if God forbid that thing's ever going to go off, we need to make sure we have plenty of communication, like backup communication plans, to be able to get people out of there, make sure the park's locked down, and just go from there.
Yeah, right. And I also think.
Make sure you have enough time to be sure that everybody's out before that thing goes off, because anybody left there is dead.
Right. And I was saying, I think like what I read in one of the blogs, how like technology in this generation is improving. How there was an app, I think it was the Zello app. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I know that app.
The Zello
app, of course. But
you can communicate with through low data. So like you were saying, you don't receive much cell service in the Grand Canyon. I think that would be a cool way if people had the option to have that app in order to get alerts if there's a danger.
And that would be a life-saving situation. And plus, of course, once one person gets once one person realizes, hey, something's going on, it's a domino effect. Eventually gets around the park, and now, okay, everybody knows this. Before long, it's time to get the hell out of there.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, just for the record, while I have time, this is my crappy phone. All right, so
Yeah, that's a good point, Arya.
Yeah, that's definitely not going to have that app. But so
Right.
at that point, I'd be hoping that I have enough data on my computer or something to that effect that I can at least get some stuff, or hopefully somebody else has that app and I start to hear, oh, heads up, this volcano is about to go. Please get the hell out of this place before a gigantic hole opens up under your feet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like that Australia video we watched for the first part of the module or whatever. I mean, it was real big on how the police officers had to, or responders had to work with local law enforcement, local communities and things like that, because they depend on each other. I mean, you can't be an authoritative figure if the people aren't gonna, support what you're doing, and you can't properly support them if you don't understand what their needs are. Right. So plan, like in the one discussed here, that's going to be vital for any type of resiliency.
Okay. Yeah, and I agree with you, and I think they should do it so each of us is going to get each of you are going to get a last word, and then take like maybe a minute to get your last word in, and then I'll stop the broadcast and get it to her.
Okay.
You first, Naria.
So just the wording about what we discussed. Are we just talking about what we discussed?
Yeah, yes.
Summarize. Okay. Like you got like maybe a minute tops.
Okay, yeah. So I was just I definitely think communications is very critical. Like I think communications and community support are like two of the most critical things during a disaster. And technology has improved, so how we were saying, there's services on the computer that tell you about sea levels, and we have apps that tell you how to communicate with people if you can't reach them. And I think that as years progress, our technology is going to improve and improve and improve. So the problems we're facing now, in 20 years, and we have a hurricane or tornado, I think,
or volcano,
it'll be much easier to handle that situation.
Mm-hmm. Right. All right. So to you, Amy, and then we're gonna get the hell out of here.
Yeah. So I mean, one of the things that I found most interesting in the readings was the notion that you should long-term or short-term resiliency or recovery as time, like in time frames that you should think of as actions. And that really made a lot of sense to me. It resonated a whole lot in reading everything. So that was one point I found interesting.
All right. So that'll do it for this week. Dr. Denham, I hope you enjoy this video. And thank you to the two of you and coming back on. Sorry about the little earlier situation, Naria, but thank you for coming on.
Oh, you're fine.
I'm glad I got to join in. Glad it worked out.
Yeah, but now that we've got the situation established, that should be good. We should be able. Let's try and get a conversation in on Saturday. I don't even care what time, as long as it's before 3:30ish, because I got church at 4:30. So other than that, I think that's all for this week.
So I'll probably be flying back on Saturday. So I'll be available Saturday evening and then all the rest of the week. But we'll talk about it after. Let's get this video.
Let's get the hell out of here. All right, thanks guys.
Bye, y'all.
Okay, thank y'all.
Thank
Bye.
You. Bye.
Bye.